world needs to hear this. Showing how these reptilian bloodlines and this Chittahuli, this reptilian group, expanded their power across the world.
This is what this nonsense is all about. There are lies. There are big lies. There are enormous lies. There are gigantic whoppers. You're dealing with people you cannot rationally have a conversation with.
Welcome to Ickeland, the podcast where I, Thomas Robertson, he, him, take you on a journey through the world of British conspiracy theorist David Icke, a self-confessed, tireless campaigner for truth. We're taking a well-earned break from Icke's book The Trap to check in and see what he's making of recent world events. Unfortunately, today we'll be covering a lot of anti-Semitic rhetoric, so if you're upset by that kind of content, and honestly, who can blame you? Sit this one out, okay? Apologies to all as well for the delay in episodes. Real life's been a bit hectic, and work, and my real work, that is, has been kicking my butt a bit, but I'm back at the podcast coalface now, and we should see some more episodes getting out. I'm excited. That being said, before we begin, I want to acknowledge the passing of Icke's daughter, Kerry. Kerry passed away since the last episode of Ickeland came out in December, and I thought it would be remiss of me not to comment on it. Besides what Icke makes public, I'm not interested in discussing Icke's personal life and family life, but I did think it was important to acknowledge the passing of Icke's daughter. Kerry was only 48 and is survived by 2 teenage children and her boyfriend. When Icke announced her death on his Twitter, he wrote that she passed away surrounded by family after a long illness. Obviously, I'm here to criticise and make fun of Icke, but I'd still like to extend my respectful condolences to the Icke family, and I do hope that time helps heal the loss of Kerry. We're looking at a video on Icke's BitChute channel, uploaded on the 4th of April 2024, entitled, "How Does One Tiny Country Get Away with Mass Murder Year After Year? David Icke Dot Connector." It's a 30-minute video, cut from the longest show available from Icke's website. These uploads to BitChute are usually to promote the content available to Icke subscribers on his media platforms, davidicke.com and The Iconic, respectively. Once again, I'll warn you against a visit to BitChute. As websites go, it's a vile open sewer. It's full of Holocaust denial, and the comments are just god-awful. Hopefully it should go without saying that I'm not endorsing Icke's platform either. Anyway, as you may have guessed already, this video is Icke discussing news about the Israel-Gaza conflict. It's a 2-for-1 special on Icke's, actually, as the segment is hosted by Icke's son, Jamie. Jamie speaks with dear old dad about the bombing of the Iranian embassy in Syria on April 1st, and the Israeli airstrike on the World Central Kitchen aid convoy in Gaza, which also occurred on the 1st of April. However, I'm only going over the Icke's coverage of the first story, mostly because they repeat themselves so much during the coverage of the second story, and they don't really have that much to add about the bombing of the aid convoy that we should spend real time looking at it. Focusing on the bombing in Syria is a bit more educational too about the Icke worldview, so plus, of the two, the comments about the bombing in Syria are the more interesting ones to me. Alright, let's jump in. The video begins with an advertisement for millionaire mindset hypnosis from Quantum Hypno, presented by Quantum Hypno founder Sarah Jane Smith. Unfortunately, there's no mention of K9 or the TARDIS, but the ad production values are similar to 70s Doctor Who. Sarah Jane promises that true love and financial windfalls will naturally follow, her quote, for you, should you undergo millionaire mindset hypnosis. Let's listen to the pitch.
Hi, I'm Sarah Jane Smith. Find your path by doing my new Millionaire's Mindset Hypnosis. I help you to break any subconscious thought patterns that are stopping you from obtaining all of your goals. The truth will then come to the forefront of your mind that you are worthy and deserving of achieving everything. You'll start to attract the right people into your life. Opportunities will open up as a result. Financial success is a natural outcome from being clear and focused. Everything will literally fall into place when you do what you love. People are already enjoying mind-blowing success with this incredible session. So what are you waiting for?
I know people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, but the production values in the ad are a bit lacking. The sound mixing on the ad sucks, but the green screen effects are laughable, so it has that going for it, I guess. Thanks to the green screens, Sarah Jane appears standing on a rock as the ocean waves crash against it. Then it cuts to Sarah Jane in hypnotic action, standing over a sleeping client in their bed as she waves her hand over them. A glitter effect spews from her hand and she looks like a fairy godmother sprinkling fairy dust over her charge. We then see the client holding hands with a new woman in his life, before they get into their red sports car together and drive off into the sunset. You'll achieve all this, we're told, once the millionaire mindset hypnosis rids you of your unconscious self-doubt and brings the knowledge that you're worthy of achieving all your goals rising to the forefront of your mind. Remember when we talked about William Walker Atkinson and his law of attraction, and the more modern take on it, The Secret? This is just more of that same old, you attract what you think type deal. The millionaire mindset hypnosis is going to help you into a sports car, we're told, by purging you of those bad thoughts that are stopping you from attracting everything you deserve. No work required. Look, I'll guarantee it'll at least purge you of your hard-earned cash. Advertisements finished with, thank God, the Ickes open with some father-son banter about Jamie's shirt.
Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Dot Connector. It's great to be back with you as always. Joining me from the Isle of Wight, as always. Dad, how you doing?
I'm good. It's a lovely, beautiful, sunny day on the Isle of Wight.
I wish I could say the same, but it's really not here. And you'll be pleased to know I've toned down the shirt this week for you, because it did cause amusement in the office that it's the first time anyone's seen you lost for words.
Yeah, well, I was a bit, because I said you were going eastwards because we did the live iconic event and you had something kind of that kind on as well. But anyway, what you wear is up to you, mate. It's nothing to do with me.
This is true. I got told this is something Gareth would wear, so I don't know if that's a compliment or not.
I didn't look to see what Jamie was wearing that blew David's mind in the last video, but, it's pretty funny that David, who spent the early 90s dressing exclusively in turquoise tracksuits to raise his vibrations, would question anyone's fashion sense. Father-son banter over and done with, the Ickes get down to business. But, right out the gate, poor Jamie makes a blunder.
But this week we're going to head over to the Middle East to begin with, because things there just seem to be evolving day in, day out. And, we've spoken recently about how Israel has become more bullish. It's not even caring what public opinion says anymore, when it used to at least pay lip service to that. And this week we've seen two events, which we'll dive into both of, which just further, emphasize that. So we'll start with the attack on the Israeli consulate in Syria, which happened over the weekend, where they claim to have killed a top Iranian military personnel. So what do you think is happening here? Are they doing the obvious, which is just poking, hoping somebody reacts, and then they've got the conflict, or is this something deeper?
Did you catch that? Jamie is introducing a story about an Israeli bombing on an Iranian embassy in Syria, but mistakenly refers to the Iranian embassy as the Israeli embassy. It's fine to make a mistake, but what isn't fine is what follows, which is nothing.
Are they doing the obvious, which is just poking, hoping somebody reacts, and then they've got the conflict, or is this something deeper?
Well, I think they are trying to poke around in the chest and seeing what reaction they can get.
Yep, the Ickes just carry right on without acknowledging the mistake. Which, makes it sound like Israel blew up their own consulate in Syria. It's a stunning real-time example of Icke's propensity to omit corrections and preferring to let what he gets wrong, or what his son gets wrong in this case, just pass by unacknowledged. Not the most auspicious of starts, but alright, let's see where we go. Anyway, just to catch you up, what Jamie is talking about is the Israeli bombing of a consular building in the Iranian embassy compound in Damascus, Syria. So, Israel's attacks on the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and Hezbollah targets in Syria have been escalating since the campaign against the Iranian-backed Hamas began in Gaza last year. Let's listen to David's curious take on the situation.
Iran says Israel bombs its embassy in Syria and kills commanders. Well, it's pretty much been admitted now that that's actually what happened. But you see, and again, this is an attack on an Iranian embassy in Syria. We're supposed to be a sovereign country, but Israel has been bombing Syria at will year after year after year. It bombs Gaza. It bombs Lebanon.
Yeah.
It does what the hell it wants. And over the years, Mossad has been exposed for going into apparently sovereign countries, not that Israel's government could care less about that, and killing their targets.
Yeah.
And sometimes they've been caught on cameras in hotels, going into a hotel room and killing someone. And it's obvious who it is, but nothing's ever done.
David hammers Israel for breaching the sovereignty of other countries and decries the countries who help arm them. David is correct that the airstrike was confirmed to have been carried out by Israel, although officially Israel has declined to comment. In their report from April 1st covering the story, the New York Times said, 4 Israeli officials, speaking on the condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive intelligence matters, confirmed that Israel has been behind the strike in Damascus. Now, obviously David protests Israel violating the sovereignty of Syria and Lebanon. As I said, Israel has been intensifying these operations since the beginning of the war in Gaza late last year, and the rationale for this is probably to deter Hezbollah, Iran, and their proxies from getting more involved in the Gaza war. Israel carries out these airstrikes and bombings on Syria and Lebanon under the belief that the airstrikes deter their regional adversaries from intensifying hostilities. From the Reuters report on the Iranian embassy strike. Joe Alterman of Washington's CSIS think tank said the attack probably reflected Israel's belief that such strikes are deterrents and make wider conflict less rather than more likely. The Israelis are convinced that if they seek to hang back, the threat will grow and not diminish, he said. They are persuaded that as long as they do something like this periodically, their adversaries will be deterred. However, Stephen Cook, an analyst at the Council on Foreign Relations in Washington, saw potential for escalation. The IRGC can loosen restraints on proxies in Iraq and Syria, placing American forces in jeopardy again, he said. The Iranians could also direct Hezbollah to escalate its attacks on Israel, which have been growing bolder and more numerous. So, there you go. The experts are split on whether these airstrikes deter hostilities against Israel, but Israel, who, have the planes and the missiles, seem to think it works. David also made reference in his commentary there to the footage of the Mossad carrying out assassinations in hotel rooms. Now, the way David describes it makes it sound like there's a video of the Mossad carrying out an execution in a hotel room. I believe what he's referring to is the assassination of Mohammed al-Mabhouh, I think that's how you pronounce his surname, on the 19th of January 2010. Now, it's alleged the murder was carried out by Mossad agents who used fake identities and fraudulent or fake passports from several European countries and Australia to travel to Dubai. CCTV footage of the suspects from the hotel's public areas exists and is available online, and while it's interesting, it's definitely more Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy than James Bond. There's a great video on YouTube putting the footage into a timeline of the murder. and I'll include that link in the show notes. Officially, the murder is unsolved, but circumstantial evidence all points to the Mossad, who have obviously and absolutely carried out assassinations like this in the past, and definitely had a motive to carry out this one, as Mabu is one of the co-founders of the armed wing of Hamas. Now, David's just getting himself warmed up here, but so far, he's mixing some truth into his rant, half-remembered and vague as it is. So, let's see where he goes next.
And people need to, who shout anti-Semitism, they need to ask themselves why, as has happened year after year after year, does Israel, this tiny piece of land in the Middle East, have this ability to do what the hell it likes, carte blanche, while the rest of the world looks on? And not only that, arms them to support them in doing it.
Okay. Icke decrying the weaponization of anti-Semitism there. Not exactly unexpected from Icke, something he said in the past, and he himself has been and continues to be called an anti-Semite. Probably because of all the, anti-Semitism. David is acting like he's the only one calling foul on what's happening in Gaza, but that's not true. It's widely acknowledged that the invasion of Gaza by Israel has triggered a humanitarian crisis, displacing Palestinians from their homes, leaving them without access to food and water, and causing avoidable Palestinian casualties. Countless protests and marches in solidarity with the Palestinian people continue to be held all over the world. Criticism has come from the national level as well. Even the US, Israel's most stalwart ally, has delivered food relief to the displaced people in Gaza, something that can only be viewed as a rebuke by the US. There has been accusations of anti-Semitism in response to these criticisms from some Israelis and some supporters of Israel. Some of it to shield Israel from criticism for their actions in Gaza. But that being said, Icke of all people cannot complain about weaponized anti-Semitism when he himself muddies the waters by expressing his anti-Semitism by couching it in the valid criticism of Israel and concerns for the Palestinian people. Whatever valid criticisms of Israel Icke may present, they're overshadowed by his anti-Semitism. It's impossible to discern whether Icke is sincerely bothered by Israeli airstrikes, their treatment of the people living in Gaza, the Mossad's overseas excursions, or if he is simply adopting these positions to present a more socially acceptable and palatable cover for his dislike of Israel, or use these more acceptable criticisms of Israel to introduce listeners and open them up to his anti-Semitic rhetoric. Given where Icke's about to take us, I'm leaning towards the latter.
Now, it doesn't take a brain of Britain or anywhere else to realize that this is not an accident. There's something about Israel and the Israeli government and the Israeli intelligence and military networks that means they don't have to live by the rules that anyone else does. Now, why is that? This is the question we should be asking, not calling people anti-Semitic for asking it, but actually asking it and demanding an answer. Because the answer will be that within this global cult that I talk about, Israel is massive. I'm talking about its government, not its people, and its intelligence and military networks are massively, massively influential and have enormous power within this cult network. And thus, they can do things that others can't do and get away with it. And of course, America's the same, Europe to an extent, and the rest of the world just has to play by their rules.
Oof. That's bad. Icke doesn't attempt to answer the questions he's posed or show any interest in the political and historical context of the situation in Gaza. The questions are rhetorical, and he doesn't have answers for them. They exist only to lead us to his anti-Semitic conspiracy. Icke just jingles his keys for the viewers and says, "Look, the cult!" Icke decries the weaponization of anti-Semitism against critics of Israel's government, but then makes the grossly anti-Semitic statement that Israel is a major force of the cult. A cult, which I'll remind you, is, according to Icke, in service to extra-dimensional forces which seek the complete subjugation of humanity. David's anti-Semitic accusations are medieval. I don't mean that in the sense that it's archaic or backwards. I mean it's literally like something from medieval Christian art, which would depict Jews as being on friendly terms with the devil and condemned to burn in hell for it. Now, David lumps in America as, quote, the same, and Europe as the same, quote, to an extent. And you may think that takes a bit of the edge off what he said about Israel being in league with the cult. And maybe it does, if you hear this rant in isolation from the rest of this video. In a few minutes, David is going to make it clear that he believes Jewish people, or people posing as Jews, have infiltrated positions of power in countries such as the US to advance the cult agenda. Yikes to that with a capital Y, but we'll get to that in a minute. I'll also note, as a quick aside, that China doesn't get a mention as a major cult power, despite David claiming that China are the cult testbed for all the cult's population and thought control techniques, and that they even instigated the COVID-19 hoax, quote unquote, as a cover story to roll out their control techniques on a global scale. But apparently, China doesn't rate a mention this week. It's all about Israel. Look, let's extend David the benefit of a doubt he doesn't deserve. Maybe he didn't mean that the way it sounded, and is going to clarify, or is going to walk it back and apologize.
Why has not been an Israeli prime minister at a war crimes court? Why isn't Netanyahu? Look at his history. The times he's been Israeli prime minister, the times he's mercilessly bombed Gaza and overseen horrors going on in the West Bank against Palestinian civilians through his army and others, these so-called Jewish extremists, who just take land in the West Bank because they can. Why is that not together a war crime overseen by Netanyahu? And why, I repeat again, are the countries that claim to be liberal democracies and care about people, why are they arming, supporting, and in terms of America, massively funding the very military networks that are doing this? It's because the global cult is massively influenced in its actions and reactions by that which controls Israel, which in the end comes down to, certainly historically, the Rothschilds.
Jesus Christ, he's making it worse. Despite trying to raise issues worth contemplating, like Israeli settlers in occupied territories, what responsibility Netanyahu bears for the deaths and displacements of civilians, the complicated relations between Israel and its Western allies, David can't talk about any of it with nuance. Not that it would matter if he did, since he immediately undermines himself by going right back to the anti-Semitic conspiracy well for another pail of bullshit about the Rothschilds. Enter Jamie to weigh in on the Rothschilds and the cult.
Yes, and as you've written about and spoken about extensively, they use the Jewish community and they use events like the Holocaust and stuff to shield themselves from criticism because they pretend to assimilate into that group when they hate that group. You've spoken about that previously because you look at Israel through COVID, that was one of the most draconian in the world, so the general population there certainly weren't looked after. And now, with this increasing, the sway of public opinion towards Israel, those people that might not actually support this, the general population, are going to be tarnished with that same brush. So you are going to lead to a rise in people actually targeting Jews. So they're using Jews as a shield, aren't they?
Yeah, well, I've written at length over the years about this this cult, which I call the Sabbatean cult. Well, that's what it calls itself as well, or the Sabbatean Frankist cult, which you can pick up in the 1600s. This is an inversion of everything Jewish. It's an inversion of Judaism, And it's controlled Israel from the start, thanks to the Rothschilds, who have been Sabbateans.
I think Jamie is attempting some damage control for his dad here. The people of Israel are victims of the cult, says Jamie, and David agrees. It's not Jewish people or the people of Israel, it's the Sabbatean cult. Who are the Sabbateans, you rightly ask? Well, it's a long and very interesting story we're going to have to get into another time in any kind of detail. But the pertinent thing to know right now is that the Sabbateans were Jewish followers of Sabbatai Zevi, a 17th century Sephardic Jewish rabbi who claimed to be the Jewish Messiah. Belief in Sabbatai Zevi is considered heretical by rabbinical Judaism, which is mainstream Judaism. So, to sum up, Icke says that a major player in the global cult, which seeks our total domination and enslavement, is actually a Jewish sect. So, that's just fucking awful. Let's see where Icke goes with this from here, though.
The Sabbateans are part of this global cult network. But the way they get away with it is, although they hate Jews and everything Jewish, they pose as Jewish. They pose as kind of, really serious followers of the Jewish religion. And they end up as prime ministers of Israel. They end up running Mossad and the Israeli Defense Forces. They end up in the stream of positions of political power in America, vastly, vastly in excess of the ratio of Jewish people to the American population. Jewish population in America is 2.2%. Then look at the Biden administration and look who is Attorney General, look who is Treasury Secretary, look who is Secretary of State, look who is Deputy Secretary of State, look who is head of Homeland Security, on and on it goes. Look who controlled the CDC during COVID and since. It's blatantly obvious, again, what's happening. And it's something that people must have the courage to speak out about, because it's this fear of being called anti-Semitic that keeps people's mouths zipped, so they don't point out the obvious. And we must, because what some of us have been talking about all these years and had meetings banned and banned from countries because of it, is now becoming, it's becoming so clear that this network out of Israel has the ability to do what it bloody likes.
Bloody hell. It just keeps getting worse. Sabbateans, we've been told, pose as Jewish and occupy positions of power and influence, not just in Israel, but also in the US. Icke is engaging in some bold-faced anti-Semitism here. Icke implies that any Jewish person in a position of power should be suspected of being a member of the cult. Icke also lets slip what he really thinks about Jews when speaking about the US. Firstly, he makes a distinction between Jews and Americans. Are Jewish Americans not American, David? Secondly, he outright says Jewish people disproportionately occupy positions of authority in the US. Were he here, I'm sure David would remind us that he's ostensibly talking about Sabbateans, not Jews. But if that's the case, why is he talking about Jewish demographics in America and not Sabbatean demographics in America? Unless, as far as Icke is concerned, they're one and the same. I don't know. It's just bloody awful. I mean, when people talk about Icke or report about him, far too often they mention and mock the lizard people aspects of his work and the conspiracy theories about the royal family, and completely neglect the anti-Semitism which runs through it altogether. Do you ever find yourself wondering if the internet was a mistake? I like the fast and affordable access to porn it provides as much as the next person, but is it really worth Icke being able to broadcast this dumb shit to everyone? I don't know. I just don't know. And unfortunately, I'm sure this will only get worse before it gets better. But who's to know if it will even get better? So on something of a down note, we have to leave this episode now. I think it's important to check in with David and see the kind of things he's saying to his followers about complicated issues like what's happening in Israel and Gaza, which, you know, should be treated with respect and talked about with nuance, but David Icke's not the man for nuance. We know that by now. Yeah. Still, you got to keep an eye on this bloke. I'm happy to take that bullet, I guess. Maybe not happy, but willing? I don't know. It's like a car crash. You can't really look away at this point, can you? Anyway, thank you for listening to this episode of Ickeland. Happy to be back at the coalface. Remember, if you have any suggestions, corrections, or just want to reach out and say hey, you can contact me at ickelandpodcast@gmail.com. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please share, like, subscribe. You don't really like podcasts, do you? Leave a review, anyway. That'd be great. Thanks for listening, and remember, until next time, don't be an anti-Semite like David Icke. It's just reprehensible. Keep your criticisms of Israel respectful and factual. For the love of God. Thanks for listening.